A silent shift within. There comes a moment when something within you changes, not in a visible way, not through external upheaval, but through subtleties so profound that only those who are awake can perceive them. It's a silent shift of the soul, a gentle disalignment between what you used to live by habit and what now pulses as inner truth. What once made sense begins to feel shallow, repetitive, soulless. The certainties that once guided you start to dissolve, not because they were wrong, but because your consciousness has grown beyond them. What was once direction becomes a question, and this question isn't doubt. It's openness. It's the space that forms when the soul is about to expand. You can't explain it because it's not something that can be said. It's something that is perceived, felt in the body, in the energy, in the silences that lengthen. As if you're walking across a bridge made of intuition and surrender, traversing a liminal space where nothing has yet materialized, but everything has already begun to move internally between who you were out of survival and who your soul longs to be by essence. This isn't a video about life stages, calendars, or goals. It's about invisible passages that mark true spiritual maturity. If these signs are alive within you, perhaps what you've called confusion is, in fact, a calling, an intimate rite of preparation for the truest life your soul has ever dared to inhabit. A deep questioning of all that once seemed true. There comes a point in the journey where the ground upon which you've built your identity begins to crack, not from error, but because that structure no longer accommodates the expansion of your soul. And that's where questioning is born, deep, uncomfortable, inevitable. You start to look at everything you once believed to be certain, ideas, roles, relationships, inherited rules, and feel a silent misalignment. It's not denial. It's maturity. It's as if your soul, now more awake, looks at the world with eyes that seek coherence and real meaning. Dogmas once accepted without reflection begin to feel constrictive. Habits once automatic now sound hollow. The narratives you used to define yourself no longer contain you, and a discomfort arises, not from a lack of direction, but because your inner compass has begun to point to places the mind doesn't yet understand. This questioning isn't destructive. It's constructive. It prepares the soil for a new truth, more aligned, more embodied, more yours. It's a clear sign that your consciousness is elevating, that your soul is asking for depth, not appearance, authenticity, not repetition. You stop wanting ready-made answers and start seeking presence. Because spiritual lucidity begins exactly like this, as a doubt that illuminates, as a desire to live something that doesn't yet have a name, but already pulses as truth within you. Silent disconnection from the old self? There's an invisible transition that happens when the soul begins to shed its skin. There's no outburst, no denial, just a subtle distancing from what once made sense, but now feels strange. You don't fight your old version. You look at it with tenderness, recognizing that it was necessary, but no longer sufficient. It's like wearing an emotional garment that once fit perfectly, but now feels tight, limiting, uncomfortable. And this sensation doesn't come from the ego, but from the soul, from the inner call to move forward lighter. Even if externally everything seems the same places, same routines, same people, internally something has already let go. It's as if your body says no before your mind can understand why. And you begin to refuse to continue on autopilot. You start to realize how much you were acting out of conditioning, habit, emotional survival. And now something in you asks for more presence, more truth, more alignment. This disconnection isn't a rejection of your history. It's a silent farewell to the layers that have fulfilled their role. It's an internal ritual of passage where you let go of what no longer vibrates with your current essence. And even if this phase brings confusion, it also brings potency, because it's in the emptying of the old that the new begins to breathe. Your soul is undressing, and this isn't loss, it's maturation. It's the clear sign that you're crossing the line between surviving and finally living as who you came to be. Intuition, becoming the central compass. There is a point in the journey where the noise of the world no longer guides your steps. Logic, once sovereign, begins to give way to something more subtle but infinitely more true, intuition. This inner voice doesn't shout, doesn't force, doesn't need to convince. It simply presents itself as a knowing that wasn't learned but has always been there, dormant beneath layers of conditioning. And then you begin to realize there are decisions that aren't made with the mind, but with the soul. Intuition is a silent beacon. It points to paths that sometimes challenge reasoning, but resonate in the body. You feel before you understand. And when you follow that feeling, everything seems to fit with a fluidity that thought could never produce. Your soul begins to operate by frequency. It doesn't seek what seems right on paper, but what vibrates true in your field. And in this change of direction, you realize that living with soul is trusting without seeing. It's orienting from within. Even if the external is still silent, the mind calculates. Intuition reveals. And when that revelation becomes your central compass, it's a sign that you're no longer asking permission to be who you are. You're remembering. You're accessing a wisdom that didn't come from outside, but was reactivated by your inner awakening. At this stage, you're no longer looking for answers. You recognize them because your soul has finally taken the helm. And what was once an uncertain path is now a sacred calling. The feeling of returning home without knowing exactly where it's a wordless calling, a memory without an image, as if something in you whispers, "This way," even when there's no visible trail. It's a strange feeling because there's no clear destination, but it's familiar because the path echoes within. You begin to walk guided by a feeling that can't be explained but pulses firmly, and without realizing it, you approach an internal space that has always been there but was long ignored. Your presence. This return home isn't geographical, it's energetic. It's not a place, it's a vibration. It's the deconstruction of the characters you assume to be accepted. It's the dismantling of the masks you wore to survive. It's the silence after the noise of trying to fit in. You feel that you no longer need to adjust to environments that distort your essence, nor prove your worth in dynamics that distance you from yourself. Because little by little, your truth begins to take up space, and that, in itself, is already a return. Home, in this context, is the state where you can exist whole, without defense, without performance. It's the moment when you begin to breathe differently, to look at the world with less urgency and more presence. It's when you realize that you're not going somewhere, you're just allowing yourself to be. And being authentically is the most sacred return there is. The soul doesn't want goals. It wants home. And when that feeling arises, even if confusing, you can trust. Something in you has found the way back. Even if the mind doesn't understand, the soul has already recognized it. Breakups and solitude as sacred preludes. There comes a phase when everything seems to unravel. Relationships dissolve, paths, once certain, lose meaning. Presences drift away without warning, and you, for a moment, feel the void settle in. But unlike other times, this void isn't despair, it's preparation. It's as if life is emptying your inner house so that something more authentic can dwell there. The breakups come, but now you feel they're not failures, they're cleansings. They're detours that align, not punishments that penalize. Solitude, once feared, begins to reveal its sacred character. Because it's in the silence of absences that you hear the deepest presence, your own. It's in this solitary space that you find the clarity that the noise of forced connections didn't allow. And even if it hurts, There's reverence in this pain, because it's washing away what no longer belongs, preparing the ground for what can only arrive when you're whole. Each breakup is a rite of passage, each loss an invitation to rebirth. You begin to understand that you weren't abandoned, you were released. That you're not alone, you're in retreat, because the new that your soul asks for doesn't arise amidst the old chaos. It needs space, silence, surrender, and life in its invisible wisdom begins to remove everything you wouldn't have the courage to let go of on your own. It's in this dark womb of solitude that the new begins to be gestated, still invisible, still untouched, but already pulsing. Because where the noise of the crowd ends, the melody of the soul begins. And it can only be heard by those who accept the void as passage, not as an end. Releasing inherited emotional roles. There's a decisive moment in the soul's awakening when you see, with almost painful clarity, the characters you've assumed throughout life. Roles that didn't arise from your essence, but from the need to belong, the attempt to be loved, the urgency not to be abandoned, the strong one who could never fall, the savior who carried everyone while crumbling inside, the pleasant one who smiled while screaming in silence, the present one who was physically there but emotionally exhausted. And then something in you decides, enough. This enough isn't anger, it's return. It's the soul saying it will no longer squeeze itself into inherited molds, that it will no longer negotiate its truth to maintain bonds based on roles, not presence. And at that moment, you begin to undress, slowly and courageously, one role at a time, even knowing that by letting go of what sustained old connections, many of them won't survive your real version. It's a silent but revolutionary process, because each disguise you remove returns a fragment of your soul, and with these fragments, you begin to recompose yourself from within, more whole, more honest, more free. You understand finally that living to meet expectations is dying a little each day, and that living with wholeness is inevitably displeasing, but never betraying yourself again. Releasing these roles isn't a rejection of the past. It's an act of self-love. It's the moment when you stop performing and start finally living. Not as others want you to be, but as your soul has always been, before the wounds, before the fears, before the performance. And it's at this point that true freedom begins, when your truth no longer asks for permission to exist. Desire to live with purpose, not performance there.